Ohio State is on the board for the spring transfer portal. Welcome to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, and that's Stefan Krajisnik, at least a video version of it. Beau Atkinson, the former North Carolina defensive end, has chosen the Buckeyes fresh off of official visit earlier this week. Stefan, 610 career snaps in 2 years for North Carolina, 54 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, and 39 pressures. A lot of that coming last year in what was essentially a breakout year. Went through the spring with the Tar Heels, who are under new leadership with Bill Belichick, and decides to enter the portal. And now I would describe this addition as I don't think they needed 100% needed to add a defensive end. I know they need defensive tackles, but they didn't need a defensive end. But if you can shore up your depth and have a pretty quality two deep, why not take that with a guy who has more snaps, more pressures, more sacks, more TFLs than everybody else in the room right now has combined?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Ohio State take a couple different routes with how they treat, the transfer portal, whether it be the spring or the winter. Sometimes you address needs. We saw that with Ethan Owenyawa and Philip Daniels. You needed offensive tackles, starting caliber offensive tackles. You go out and get them there. We've also seen them use the transfer portal in a way where if you can get better at a position and you have an opportunity to get a guy, why not? Quinshon Judkins joined this team when they had Travion Henderson, right? Like we see them going after offensive tackles here in this spring portal window, bringing guys in on visits where you probably feel like you've got 4 starting caliber offensive tackles and a 5th one in Carter Lowe, who's just a true freshman, but a really highly rated guy. But if you've got opportunities to add more depth, get more guys, why not go after it? And I think that's where Beau Atkinson kind of fits into this of, like you said, you didn't need defensive ends. You feel pretty good about Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, and even with your second strings with Logan George and CJ Hicks. But when you can get a guy who's done it at this level, if the opportunity is there, why not go after him? And that's exactly what they did here. This is an awesome pickup for them, in my opinion, because you didn't really get a depth piece in the sense of this guy's just going to give you a body. Like, this is a guy who's ready to play. This is a guy who's done it. You and I are in agreement that the starters, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, are both very good, right? They had to wait an extra year because Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau decided to come back for their senior seasons. Those two guys are ready for breakout years with Ohio State. You're getting a guy who had 7.5 sacks last year. That's, if I did the math right, that's what Kenyatta and Caden have combined in their career. Yep. So you're bringing in a guy who's done it, who's got playing time and experience. He's not only a depth piece, he's gonna push for some playing time here. Now it's tougher always with the spring edition guys. It's a quick turnaround to get ready to play for a new team and a new scheme. When you don't have the whole spring to work with them. But with what he's going to be asked to do, I think he can slot in pretty quickly. I think he's a guy who's going to push for a lot of playing time. And like we were saying earlier, not a need for Ohio State, but you just got a lot better at defensive end by adding Beau Atkinson, and that's not going to hurt.
I'm going to throw some numbers at you here. 120 tackles, 31 tackles for loss, 21.5 sacks, 10 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles, and 115 pressures. That's what Ohio State lost to the NFL draft after the 2024 season. Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who have essentially played every meaningful snap you can think of the last 2 years. That's just last year. And so when you're living in a world where, yes, the passing game, yes, Jeremiah Smith, yes, Quinshon Judkins, yes, Travion Henderson, but you want to know what made this defense so dominant, especially in the playoff? Those two guys came alive. A lot of that production last year came during the 4-game college football playoff run. That's what you're trying to replace. And sure, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry might be pretty good. CJ Hicks might finally be in a role where his skill set can be fully utilized. Logan George had a pretty good spring from what we hear in terms of a guy who was coming from the FCS level and moving up to the Power 4 level from Idaho State. Zion Grady has a bright future there. You've got some other young guys there. Joshua Mickens, maybe he's ready to go in year 3. But again, this comes back to you're replacing 120 tackles, 31 TFLs, 21.5 sacks, 10 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles, and 115 pressures from last season. That's your replace. Beau Atkinson gives you the numbers. You just mentioned it, 7.5 sacks last year. But he's also the most experienced guy on the roster now in terms of going against competition and playing meaningful snaps. So again, not a need, absolutely, because you think the guys you had were pretty good. But the language we're now using with this defensive end room, going from a group that can you replace all that production from a group that just led you to a national championship to, okay, you feel pretty solid about this group, especially when you look at some of the quarterbacks they might have to face in 2025.
Yeah, it's my understanding that he's got a couple years of eligibility left too. So like this isn't necessarily a one and done guy. Now he could have a big year and go to the NFL draft, and that's a different discussion to have. But it's just one of those things where you probably went into the portal thinking, okay, if you can get a decent defensive end, get him. Otherwise, you're not stressing too much about it. Again, defensive tackle feels like a whole different conversation. But when a guy like this comes up and you have an opportunity, well, why not take it? And I think that's one thing that Ohio State's done a good job of. And we talk about culture and things like that so much when we talk about Ryan Day and this program. But there's not a lot of programs where you can go out and get a Beau Atkinson and hold on to a Kenyatta Jackson and a Caden Curry and CJ Hicks and Logan George. There's an understanding with that defense and with the program of how these things can kind of work and how you can kind of share the load and still all be productive over the course of a 16-game season. This is how you have to build teams in this new college football playoff era. You can't just address needs and fill holes with the transfer portal. You've got to get better at positions where you don't maybe even think you have to get better at. But there's a name out there that can add to it, and boom, we get to December, and all of a sudden your defensive ends are relatively fresh because you went out and got a starting caliber guy from the transfer portal in the spring. So it feels like a no-doubt move if you can make it, and I think Ohio State did just that.
So the Buckeyes are on the board with another transfer portal addition. First of the spring, though, Beau Atkinson, the North Carolina defensive end transfer, spent the first 3 years of his career with North Carolina, former 2022 recruit, spent the last 2 years breaking out. Get the text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial. All this information, we're doing a video about it right now. We're going to go pod about it, even though we're going to say a lot of the same things. We've written stories about it, but this is the first place we're going to go with it. 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial. I promise you it's a good time. Stefan, that's Stefan. I'm Steven. Beau Atkinson, newest Buckeye for the 2025 season. See ya.